Hello and welcome to the in-season version of the Dynasty Hotseat. An amazing guest we got for you today. We've got Tom Strachan back on the show. Find him at NFL_T-Strack. Let's get the in-season version of the Hotseat rolling right now. Yes. Hello, and we can see him sitting beside me here now. We got T-Strack back on the hot seat, episode 1 of our new in-season version. Tom, great to see you again. How you doing, mate?
I'm good, man. I mean, this is a complete privilege to be guest numero uno on the first in-season hot seat. So thanks for having me. Like anyone, it's the content's thick and fast at this point. I'm just ready for the season to get underway and see how many takes I'm wrong about.
Yeah, exactly. And once we're finished recording here, I've got about an hour's worth of setting rosters and tweaking things and just going through everything to do before the game start. But yeah, it is so exciting that football is finally back. And Tom, obviously we said last time you're on, but just for people who don't know, obviously, you're an NFL best ball and DFS writer for the Football Outsiders, and I know you're doing some lots of extra great stuff with them as well. You wanna talk us through what you're doing with the Outsiders?
Yeah. So it's a busy season for me. So on Tuesdays, I'll be writing a column for Football Outsiders, which will be a look back at the fantasy fallout from the previous weekend. Thursdays, you can find my DFS deep dive, which is normally a very big, full, sprawling piece of work that covers cash games for DFS tournaments, stacking, and my usual dry sense of humor in there. Thursday evenings at 8 o'clock, you can find me and Ian O'Connor doing a sports betting DFS fantasy preview show where we go game by game, giving both our thoughts from the betting side and the DFS, covering everything. And then on Saturdays, doing a column for Fantasy Pros where we look a week ahead at waivers. So not the waivers of the current game week, but try to get a little bit ahead and see which players might be the hottest property in a few days' time and just hoover them up before your teammates get them.
I mean, what a busy guy you are, Tom. And you don't forget to go over, because he's also got NFLbestball.co.uk that he runs as well. So go over there, have a look at that, and see all the amazing stuff that Tom offers. And he's about to offer some amazing tips for week 1 of the new season. So we're going to do the same thing as before the show. We got hints and tips, and then we got a few roster breakdowns as well, and starting lineup, starting sits questions. So we're going to start off with, as always, with some hints and tips just for this week in Dynasty. So Tom, what are you thinking for week 1 going into? Is anything standing out for you?
Yeah, I think it's kind of important to just remember that a lot of these projected scores on the apps which you're using, whether it's NFL.com or Sleeper or anywhere else, a lot of these projected points were just rubbish. Compare those. But if you're going to really be stuck on a player, look at websites where you can find rankings for free, places like Fantasy Pros where you can view the expert consensus ranking, which is loads of different people's rankings taken into one. Or, there's hundreds of people out there putting good rankings together. But you can log into some of these, and I looked on NFL.com app, which is where my home league is for all my sins. DJ Moore's projected for 6 points, 6 points in half PPR. No, I'm not having that. So that's, it can be easy to just look at the scores on there and go, oh, okay, yeah, well, that seems about right. But take your time. I mean, let's get off to a strong start, and let's make sure that we're not just putting players in based on what a website is projecting, based on who knows what kind of formula. The other thing is, don't panic. If it's a long old season, and don't overthink and overstress these start sits this week, because you're going to have loads of time to catch up. Nobody ever lost their fantasy season by losing in week 1.
Yeah, absolutely love those tips. And yeah, you're right, that those projected points, even just today, I was looking at some of my teams, and I looked at Isaiah McKenzie on Sleeper, just full PPR. he's projected to get like 13 points or something. But then also like Gabe Davis is projected to get 15 points. Stephon Diggs is projected to get like 20 points. I'm like, they're not going to, that can't happen. Like, unless the Bills absolutely demolish the Rams, which, can't really see happening, Super Bowl champions. Like, you're right. Just be careful with those, projected points and don't let that throw you off too much from what you think is going to happen. So, yeah, I completely echo your thoughts there on week number 1 heading into it. And one thing I just wanted to say as a tip from myself is just be careful, with these Thursday night games. Like, just be careful. And it might seem silly, but I know there's certainly reasons to do it. Just be careful who you're putting in your flex spots and who you're putting in your like position slots as well, because it's much easier, to replace players if they're sitting in your flex spot. You don't want that flex spot locked out for someone if they score like 0 points or if they get injured. So just make sure you're putting players in places where you can easily replace them. That makes sense, Tom. Did I explain that properly?
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And it's something that I think it's starting to become more commonplace and people are cutting on to it a lot more. Like, you can't really go on Twitter today without people saying, don't start your Thursday night players in the flex. But it's a good mindset to get into, and not just for these games, but also for the Sunday 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock games as they are in America. Like, you want to keep your flex spots for the latest possible player that is going to be playing for your team, so that it gives you the most flexibility to move them out.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've got people ready to go. Unless, do you have any other hints and tips for week 1, Tom, or we're gonna deep dive on some rosters?
No, I think it's, we've had a long off season. It's like, most of us are invested in our player takes by now. Just stick with your convictions. Keep following the Twitter news drops. We're all going to wake up on Sunday morning to tweets from Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter talking about player fitness of like 50 different players. Yeah. Make sure that you give yourself time on Sunday to check through those and try and give yourself sort of 10 minutes around lock to make sure that everyone is still playing.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, one final tip. Hey, just have some fun, right? It's a game. Let's enjoy it, right? Don't forget that whenever, things start to crumble around you, it doesn't look like it's going to go right. Just remember the game, have some fun, enjoy it, and don't let fantasy football ruin the enjoyment of watching the game. So that's my last tip for everybody listening. And we're going to pull up 2 of our rosters, both from Sleeper. We're going to have a look at them, Tom, and we're going to say, who do we think should be starting? Who do we think should be on the bench? And then we'll just have a quick little chat about what advice we have for each other going forward for these rosters. So I'm going to pull up one of mine first on here. And you can see here, I've got Dak Prescott at quarterback, then Christian McCaffrey and Alvin Kamara, CeeDee Lamb, Keenan Allen, and Devonta Smith in the wide receiver positions, TJ Hawkinson, and then in the flex spots, I mean, you got to love these 2, right, Tom? I did this. This is why I picked this roster. I've got J.K. Dobbins and Rashad Bateman in there. And then we've got Isaiah McKenzie, that's who I was looking at earlier, was on this roster, Isaiah McKenzie. And then Matthew Stafford in there. On the bench, Aaron Rodgers and Zach Wilson, Khalil Herbert. You got Wilson from the 49ers. You got Johnson from the Browns, Gio Bernard, Mason from the 49ers, Deontay Foreman, Madison, Jared Patterson, Devin Harty. Now, did he change his name? Didn't he used to be Harris?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, so we got Harty now on there, Denzel Mims, Samuel, Collins, Edwards, Laquan Treadwell, Callaway, Parham, and then a bunch of other guys, right? So
it's a little thin when you get to the bench there. I mean, this is a great looking team. I mean, it's definitely a contender. And before anyone starts, I can see clearly at the top it's 12 teams. So this isn't some kind of 6-team league where you've got everyone stacked out. So it's a really nice team. I think, I mean, firstly, you need to look at the fact that your quarterback and Isaiah McKenzie and Matthew Stafford both play tonight. So you need to move them out of your flex spots, as we said.
Exactly.
But I think the main problem here is probably going to be J.K. Dobbins. Whilst John Harbaugh has been avoiding talking about the health of Dobbins too much and saying, we'll see. That's classic Harbs. He loves to lead people on as much as he possibly can. And then all of a sudden, a player will be out. And Lamar Jackson was speaking to beat reporters yesterday, and he said at one point, he said, yeah, we'll see him out there in a couple of weeks. So that seemed like a bit of a hint that J.K. Dobbins are always ready. I mean, there's just no point rushing him. It's against the Jets. If the Ravens can't beat the Jets without J.K. Dobbins, and what are we doing? Yeah. So I think you're definitely going to have to move Dobbins, but that just inflates the value of Bateman because the guys like Mike Davis and Kenyon Drake aren't going to offer anywhere near the ceiling in the running game that Dobbins can. So, yeah, aside from that, I think your starting lineup's pretty sweet. It'd be, in terms of finding a player to replace him, the main name that stands out to me is Nico Collins. The Colts are a really good defensive team, but I really like what the Texans have done. They've built like a nice, solid core of youth around Davis Mills. You've got Brandon Cooks, who is obviously not youthful, but is a very savvy veteran. You've got Nico Collins. You've got Brevin Jordan, and obviously everyone's favorite running back at the minute, Dameon Pierce. So I feel like the Texans are going to be able to stick around in games a little bit more than they used to. And Nico Collins is the kind of player who could easily end up sort of seeing 6-7 receptions, which in PPR is going to put you on a good step already.
Yeah, absolutely love that. So why don't we? Well, let's do this then, Tom. Let's go through. So let's see. Dak Prescott, a quarterback. Gotta be happy with that, right? Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara.
Yeah, it's true. Well, the Dak pick, I mean, he's playing the Bucks, so it's not an easy game by any means. But last year, these two opened the season and they combined for 60 points, and most of that was through the air. So I would possibly consider Aaron Rodgers, but I think I'd probably lean towards Dak Prescott. So yeah, let's roll with him.
We've got Christian McCaffrey. Oh. We've got a lot of Christian McCaffrey. Let me do that. There we go. We've got Christian McCaffrey here and Alvin Kamara. Looking at the people that can go in, obviously we don't want Dobbins. None of these guys are really standing out to me as what about you thinking?
Those two,
no way, right? So yeah, we'll keep McCaffrey and Kamara. The wide receiver positions here, we've got Lamb, Allen, Devonta Smith. So, like you said, we're wanting to take Rashad Bateman away and pop him into. Oh. Did that work? It did work. We're going to pop Rashad Bateman into our wide receiver slot, yeah?
Yeah. And McKenzie wants to move up into your wide receiver slot, so he's not in your flex.
Perfect. McKenzie sitting down there too. So let's get CeeDee Lamb and Keenan Allen in there for now. And Isaiah McKenzie, he's an interesting topic, right? Obviously, like, I mean, if you listen to Twitter, they'll tell you that he's won the role. But, I mean, Jamison Crowder is, a savvy veteran. I wouldn't be shocked if Crowder is actually the one that has that role. So McKenzie's a player. I've got a couple of shares in, but I'm a bit skeptical about starting him and trusting him to get that snaps count that I'm going to be happy with.
Yeah, there were reports towards the end of training camp that once Jamison Crowder was healthy, whilst Isaiah McKenzie was missing a little bit of time, that Crowder looked really good and might just have taken control of that role back. But like you, I've got McKenzie in a few spots, and I'll be starting him tonight because it's game one. You want players involved, and if I'm starting Isaiah McKenzie, it's normally because I don't have a better option on the bench. And I don't know. I mean, let's take another look at your wide receivers. It's Curtis Samuel, who you could possibly make a case for against the Jags. That feels like a game which could be okay, but we've really not seen Curtis Samuel play in quite a while now. He barely touched the ball last season, was injured, and it doesn't sound like he's been lighting it up at training camp. And outside of him, you're pretty thin at wide receiver, so I'd definitely be sticking with Isaiah McKenzie for now.
Yeah, let's stick with McKenzie. And you're right, that was a good point. I didn't even think of that, Tommy. You want somebody in the first game, right? You want somebody in that team involved. So yeah, I think that's a good point. It makes it all things more interesting. And then Devonta Smith, I think he's a lock as well. Right? You gotta love Devonta Smith and Hawkinson in there at tight end. I've not got too much in the way of anything else actually at tight end. Yeah, I've still got Jericho. It's a bit of work to do.
Yeah. It's just Donald Parham, someone who's kind of interesting, but I think Gerald Everett's going to be really good in that offense this year. And I'm very high on TJ Hawkinson. Like, as a community, it seems like the Dynasty community is a little bit out on him. But like last year, he was on for a career year in yardage and yards after catch and all these statistics, even though his touchdowns regressed a bit. That's always something like if you see a player who's putting up good stats, despite not getting the touchdowns, that always makes me happy. And I'm happy to roll with Hawkinson again this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got quite a few shares of Hawkinson, so I'm happy you're saying that, Tom. And now we get to the point. J.K. Dobbins, we're thinking is a no-go for
I'd be pretty surprised at this point if they play him. And if they do, it doesn't sound like he's ready to probably dominate the Jets in the way that you would hope. So, yeah, I think probably give yourself a bit of contingency. I think, Khalil Herbert's somebody I've drafted a lot in best ball this year as a known David Montgomery hater. And I do think he's going to see a decent amount of time. But that game against the Niners this week has one of the lowest over-unders of the week. We're expecting like less than 43 points there. And it just feels like it could get a bit messy. The Bears O-line's so poor and the San Francisco 49ers D-line so good that it doesn't really spell a great recipe for Khalil Herbert this weekend. So maybe keep scrolling on that one.
Yeah, let's avoid Herbert. And again, this roster, I picked this roster because it's one of my most interesting ones where I feel like I'm really, really reliant on people staying healthy, or I'm just going to have to start selling pieces off soon because it's not a lot of depth to it. So I'm seeing people like Nico Collins there standing out. Brian Edwards is an interesting one as well. I just don't trust either of the quarterbacks who are going to be playing. I don't know who's going to start. Probably Mariota, right? But I don't really trust him to get Edwards involved.
And again, the Saints defense is just really good, so it's not a passing attack, which I'd want to take a lot of gambles on. I think really you could possibly make a case for Alexander Mattison, but Nico Collins is a standout.
Yeah, I completely agree. So I'm going to get Nico Collins swapped in there in the flex spot. CeeDee Lamb, no one's going to come in for CeeDee Lamb or Keenan Allen. And then the last kind of thing we have then is Stafford going to get it done against the Bills, or do we try and swap in Aaron Rodgers playing up against the Vikings?
It's a really tough choice, that one. That's probably something that give me a little bit of a headache because, we've had these reports that Matthew Stafford wasn't feeling great through the offseason. And then today there's been all these reports that he's actually feeling better than he was a year ago. Aaron Rodgers, if you're looking at it and it's like, all right, you don't have Devontae Adams anymore. It sounds like Alan Lazard might not play. I'm not sure how healthy Robert Tonyan is. So you're left with like Randall Cobb, Sammy Watkins, who might be a week one hero, but that's about it. So I think I would possibly lean towards Matthew Stafford. I think, you've got that opening day fixture. It's going to be good. Both teams do have really good defenses tonight, but I'd still lean towards the Rams. And after months of Sean McVay scheming things up, be confident that they're going to put up numbers. Yeah,
absolutely. So let's keep Stafford locked in there. And the last kind of thing we're gonna do on this roster is anyone standing out to you here, Tom, where you think you need to sell this person if you can, or just cut them, just get rid of them? Because there's a few people I'm thinking I could definitely just cut and get rid of.
I think you've definitely got some roster cloggers there. Yeah. People like was Jarrett Patterson even kept by the Commanders? I thought he might have been cut. Laquan Treadwell, I think he's on the New England practice squad now. I think Donta Foreman's somebody who's definitely interesting and could see some value with McCaffrey one time. Jared Cook, I think it's time to just say thank you for your service and move on there.
So has Jared Cook officially retired?
No, I think he's kind of in that sort of limbo where he might rock up for a team if they have an injury, but I mean, he wasn't particularly great last year. Is he really going to be that great again?
Probably not, right?
But yeah, definitely feels like depth is going to be your toughest thing when you get into the bye weeks.
Yeah, absolutely agree on this roster. And it's a tricky one for me to figure out. I was toying with trying to blow it up, but there's too much there that's good. So I just need to figure out and maybe go ahead and try and use some of these pieces here, some of these draft pieces to try and bring in a little bit of better depth as well and get.
It's impressive that the starting roster is as good as it is, and you've got 223 firsts. I mean, you could easily move one of them for two or three good depth pieces and give yourself a lot more room to breathe.
Yeah, exactly. So that's on my to-do list tonight before the game starts. So I'll certainly be doing that, Tom. And thank you so much for your advice on that. We've got our team locked in. That will be my starting lineup, barring any injuries. So if I don't win, then I can just blame you. So it's all right. Let's take my roster off there. And yeah, thanks so much for the advice there, Tom. And we're going to pull up one of your rosters as well. We're going to do a very, very similar thing. We're going to have a look at the starting lineup, what it looks like, and if there's any kind of changes that you would make and why you would make them as well. So let's add this into the stream. And there we go. We can see you got off well, I mean.
I mean, of course. So this was a startup that I did earlier this year, probably around March time, maybe a little bit later than that. And yeah, 12-team, full PPR league, no funky scoring or anything. And of course, got my boy Lamar at QB. And I went 0 RB in this startup. I was very much like, I wanted to pad out the wide receivers and the tight ends and really just push through the depth. So let's see. So you can see it's not a very deep one, this. It's the benches are only 4, 6, 8, 10, sort of 12 people. So it's really, you definitely have to keep an eye on what's available on the waiver wire, whereas some of the leagues I'm in, and probably the same for yourself, quite big benches or really deep starting lineups. So yeah, so at quarterback, I've got Lamar Jackson, who's playing the Jets. Aside from him, I have Rodgers and Daniel Jones. So I think my decisions at quarterback are pretty easy this weekend. Danny Jones will be warming the bench, and Lamar will be staying firmly where he is.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, the problem area of this team, and one which I will probably need to make a move soon to try and get a little aggressive with it. I have J.D. McKissick, who's seen his value rise a little bit with the unfortunate news of Brian Robinson being shot and missing a bit of time. So
a crazy bit of news.
Yeah, but he might be able to keep me afloat a little bit through the early part of the season whilst I sit and wait at one of these teams to suddenly go into a rebuild.
Yeah.
So we've got that. And my choices on the bench, you can see I've got James Robinson, fresh off his Achilles injury, Kenny Gainwell, who should definitely see more time this year, and then Travis Homer, who's maybe going to see limited opportunities with Kenneth Walker out. Would you move either McKissick or Ramondre Stevenson out for one of those three?
The only one I would see there that is tempting me would be I'm not sure who the starting guy is going to be at Philly. It could be at just an even split with Gainwell and Sanders. So it might be like McKissick coming out and Gainwell coming in, but that's a bit of a coin flip because McKissick is so safe for that receiving floor.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is probably how I'll go because the matchup against Jags is fairly friendly, and Ramondre is somebody I'm kind of counting on to do well. I do feel like James Robinson, by all accounts, he's not going to be limited in practice, and apparently he's going to not be on a pitch count or anything for Sunday. But I'd quite like to see it before I start trusting him in the starting line. So then at wide receiver, this definitely the kind of more of the strength of my team. So I've got Tyreek Hill playing against New England in his debut for Miami, Marquise Brown in his debut for Arizona against Chiefs. I mean, that one's going to be shootout material. Devonta Smith, much like yourself, I'm very high on Devonta Smith. MVS, my boy, got to hope that he goes big in that big shootout between the Cardinals and the Chiefs. Then on the bench, so the bench is a little bit miserable. I've got my boy Will Fuller, who starting to feel like he might just not play ever again.
Yeah, it's weird, right? I was certain he would have signed for someone. I think with Deshaun Watson confirmed to be playing this year, I was sure he would end up at the Browns, but nothing yet.
Yeah, maybe he just sits out until Deshaun's playing.
Maybe.
And speaking of not playing, obviously I've got Calvin Ridley. It just felt like the dip to buy him, even when he was suspended for the whole year, was just very cheap, and I'm happy to sit here with him taking up a bench spot the whole year.
Are you able? Because I know in some leagues I am in, you are able to put suspended players on the IR, and some leagues I'm not. Are you able to even put Ridley on IR?
No. Which,
No.
to be fair, is probably how it should be.
I agree. Yes.
So then I've got Robbie Anderson, who I do expect a bit of a bounce back, but this week against Cleveland, it's not really a game where I'm looking to cram in players. It feels like that could be quite a low-scoring affair, possibly. Curtis Samuel, much like yourself, we kind of covered that. So my wide receivers are kind of set. And then at tight end, I've got big daddy Travis Kelce. So it's not really a case of me looking to move him out, but I do have Higbee and Njoku, and I could possibly be swayed into starting Njoku if anything happened, like if there was any kind of injury reports about one of these guys. I do think we're going to see a lot of good fantasy goodness. And the only running back I've got who I could bring into my starting lineup is James Cook of the Bills. How do you feel about him?
So sort of what you said before, like with James Robinson, actually, is I need to see it to believe it a little bit with Cook. It's always hard to tell with these rookies coming in, and there's a lot of talk about maybe he's going to play some snaps in the slot as well, and that could be hugely valuable. But with him, you just got to see it first. I think Singletary came on so well at the end of last season. It's hard to see him like just being moved on from when they finally just got it right with him. So
is there anyone who you'd swap out of my starting lineup for any of these bench guys?
The only one that's standing out to me would be maybe MVS, because he's so hot and cold, right? But he could be the guy that wins you the matchup if he blows up going hot. And it's hard to know. Like, we just assume that MVS is going to be used in the same role at the Packers, or same role at the Chiefs that he was used in the Packers. But it's, again, there's so much turnover and movement this season that we don't really know how he's going to be used. Obviously, if this was, best ball, you'd be saying, "Oh, I love MVS for best ball." Like, I think last time you were on the show, I was like, he's the guy I think of whenever you say best ball. I always think Marquez Valdes-Scantling, because he's so, exploding and then nothing for a while. So he's maybe like the riskiest player there, but I can definitely back the choice for putting him in, because he could just tip it over.
I think, that game's got the highest over-under of the week. We're expecting a minimum of 54 points, so it's kind of tricky to not want pieces in that game. So, it's a little bit of a gamble, but one I'm happy to take.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think it's a solid bet and a good gamble. In terms of moving forward with that team, I think you nailed it as well. Just see if you can gather up some of those running backs and see how many pieces you can grab for that. But the wide receiver room looks good. Quarterback room looks good.
If you had a team this kind of 0 RB-ish, how late in the season would you be comfortable pushing things before you go out and start looking to buy a running back for it?
I would assess the lay of the land maybe week 5 maybe.
Okay, that's a good point to get to.
Like, have a look and see how you're doing. If you're like not looking like you're going to make the playoffs, then I wouldn't waste your picks on a running back. But if you're kind of like, I'm actually doing it right here, looks like I'm going to make the playoffs, and I think it's always worth making that push. But always, have a look around. The most said tip on this show is, you have to know the opposition as well. So, like, have a look at the other players' games and go like, oh, I could make the playoffs, but there's no way I'm going to be able to beat that team unless something horrible happens to them. So I would, week 5, have a look and see what you think. But it's looking like a nice roster going forward. It's got a nice mix of experience and youth in there.
And I think something that I always preach is get comfortable being uncomfortable. So it's like, you can look at that roster for a few weeks of the season before bye weeks, and it's like, it's fine. My wide receivers, tight end, quarterback should be dominant enough to keep me afloat. I'll win matchups. I might lose a couple, but then injuries will start happening, or players will be available on the waiver wire, and I can make my moves, and I'll still be confident I'll be in the playoffs come December.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm pretty confident for you as well, Tom. You know, someone as talented as you are, I think you'll be easily making the playoffs. And you know, guys, that's it. It's a shorter show. It's not long. We don't have 18 rounds of drafts to go through. We've had a look at 2 teams. We've had a look at some hints and tips for week 1. Tom, amazing. Thank you so much for coming back on. You know, guys, he said he's got a podcast. You know, today it is actually full disclosure. It's 1 hour before he's got to go do another podcast. So, Tom, amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come onto the hot seat again. And do you just want to remind everyone where they can find you online one more time?
Yeah, thanks, Mags, and I appreciate that. And anytime you want me to come in, I'm always happy to come and chat with you. So you can find me on Twitter at NFL_tstrack. You can find my fantasy work at Football Outsiders for DFS and general fantasy content. You can find my podcast video stream over there, and then you can find my work on Fantasy Pros as well. And obviously, I'm always on Twitter tweeting rubbish out. So yeah.
Amazing. And guys, thank you so much for tuning in again. And same rules apply. It's still behind me. It's still there. It's still the Hall of Flame. Get liking the video on YouTube. The more likes it gets, the more chance Thomas got for ending up on the Hall of Flame. So let's see if we can get him there second time around. So guys, thank you all for tuning in. Have fun. Week 1. We finally made it back. Hopefully everyone has an amazing season, unless you're in leagues with me. So until next time, remember, keep your teams and yourselves lit. See you later.